Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for our second webinar in the Small Business Week series on behalf of the Queensland Government. Today we're talking business continuity planning. It's a topic that not many people give too much consideration to sometimes, but it's certainly one they wish they had when disaster strikes. So good on all of you for getting on today, ready to learn as much as you can to strengthen your business and make sure that it basically can operate should the unpredicted happen. Actually, I'll go back a step and mention for anyone out there who likes to tweet, there is a Twitter handle for the Queensland Government's Twitter account, and you're welcome to send them messages at businessqldgov with the hashtag QLDBiz, and they'd love to hear about what you thought about today's webinar, or feel free to contribute to it during the session as well. A quick introduction for those of you who haven't been on a webinar with me before. My name's Yvette Adams. I've started a lot of different businesses, now 5. I've sold 2 of them, and these days my main focus is as the CEO and founder of the Creative Collective. So our company's very excited to have developed and be delivering this webinar series in conjunction with the Department of Tourism Major Events Small Business and the Commonwealth Games, otherwise known as DTESB. I also have a newer online startup called AwardsHubcom. It's a portal where you can find business awards you could enter. Feel free to go have a look if that's something you're looking for in your business. Look, on a day-to-day basis, we work with startups right through to really big companies locally on the Sunshine Coast where we're based, and also across Australia, and even a few internationally as well. We do all of that. I juggle it with being a mum, and if any of you online today are also a parent, you'll know that that can be very much a juggle being the operative word sometimes, but it's a lot of fun as well. And we absolutely love training and assisting others, which is what we're here to do with you today. So this is what we'll cover today. We want you to understand what your risks in business are, because basically every business does have risks. And it's always a job that you put off doing risk management, risk assessment, business continuity planning, but it's when disaster strikes that you really wish you had put a bit of time in. So I'm really glad you're on today to kind of look at that and maybe bring it to the front of your mind rather than being on the back burner. We basically want you to have a plan, practice a plan, and know that there's lots of resources available to you. We'll point you to where you can find those out. Now, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session, but we're very open to you interacting via text chat throughout the session too. Here's how you can do that. If you actually click on this little red arrow, it should expand, and under the questions section, you can pop a question or a comment to me or Anthony, who's from our office, Anthony Viner. He's online today too, and he is facilitating with me. He'll be answering questions and here to help with any technical assistance you may require as well. So just to make sure you've got a handle on how the system works, could you drop us a line in the text chat area, say hi, do a smiley face, tell me how your morning's been going, whatever you feel like talking about. Okay, here they come. Tracy's given me a smiley face. Thanks for that, Tracy. Hi again, Anthony. John's back on. He was on yesterday as well. Welcome again. Few others, here we go. James says, great, exclamation mark. Hi from Neil. Fantastic. So keep those coming through. Make sure you get the hang of it. It's great. I'm seeing a few names that I do remember on the webinar yesterday. The other function I want you to understand is this putting up your hand. So over here on the left, you can see if you click on that, it actually raises your hand. So I would like all of you who were on yesterday's webinar to please raise your hand. How many were joining us and you're doing a bit of a series with us? Fantastic. Well, welcome back to all of those who were on yesterday, and a special welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time today. Okay, you've got on today to learn about business continuity planning. So with all of that said and done, let's get into it. The first thing we want to discuss is the word resilience, because in business, if you're not resilient, you're not going to last very long. Business in just day-to-day operations throws you a few knocks, but things get even harder when the unexpected happens. Things like disasters, could even be lawsuits, or all sorts of things can happen with staffing and so on as well. So being resilient is having the capacity to prevent, mitigate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impacts of disaster. all of us want to minimize the effects, don't we? Because we don't want it to take our businesses out, and sometimes these things do because businesses just weren't prepared. We want to be able to cope with the impacts, and we need to be dynamic about how we develop and strengthen our business over time. This should be a constant job, not just something you do once and set and forget. We also need to look at how we can build resilient individuals in our organisations, and resilient communities. I'm presuming a lot of you are from around Queensland, and we saw a fantastic example, and there's a picture on the screen of what an amazingly resilient community Brisbane became when the floods came through as well, didn't we? So to go into BCP, or Business Continuity Plan, there's a fair bit to understand, but this here from the Business Continuity Institute, this quote first up, might give us a good way to understand it. BCP is a holistic management process that basically identifies impacts that threaten an organisation and build a framework for building resilience and the capability for an effective response, because that's going to safeguard people, and not only people but your company's reputation, your brand, and all the activities you do to continue operating. So the typical contents of a BCP, a Business Continuity Plan, which really we're hoping everyone on the webinar and a whole lot more people that you know will develop one of these if you don't already have one as a result of today, or if you already have one that you'll go back and revisit it, should have that kind of list of contents. So I'm curious, hands up if you already have a Business Continuity Plan. You're already all over that one. We've got one hand up. Well, that's probably why you're on today, so good on you, that one person, AD, who does have one. Please, you do, and I hope we can give you a few tips on how you might be able to brush it up. For everyone else, stay tuned. Let me give you how you get one of these. If you can remember nothing else from today's webinar, remember this. It's called the PPRR principle, and it basically stands for prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. And you need to go through this process to basically minimize the risk and have a continuity plan in place. So the first thing we want to do is prevent anything ever happening. Of course, there's certain things we cannot prevent that are outside of our control, but we can prevent the impact of these things by doing a risk management plan as part of that process. We can be prepared, and then we need to know how we would respond. If you can actually plan that before it happens, you'll find it rolls out a lot smoother. And then also a recovery plan, because when these things strike, you sometimes lose your head. In fact, everyone around you can lose their head. So if you've got a plan, you just follow the script and things become a lot easier. So this PPRR is basically what they call a comprehensive approach to emergency or disaster plan. So we're going to go into each of these concepts a bit more. I'm curious, before we do, I'm going to admit right now, I actually am lucky enough to have not had a business go through a major disaster. Hands up here if you have. You've lived through a cyclone, a flood, something that's had a major impact. Okay, AD and Neil have. Guys, I'd love you to, and Elizabeth has as well, I'd love you to text chat through what that disaster was and how it impacted the business, because we might be able to get some stories going on soon towards the end, so you can speak from experience as well. And also tell us whether some of these things are practical and you wish you had had perhaps. So prevention, if we look at that first P, it's basically about evaluating risks. So you need to go through and work out things that could impact your business if they were to occur. Then you need to analyze them, assess their impacts, work out which ones are a priority, treat them to minimize their impact, and then develop your risk management plan. The thing is, we all think it won't happen to us, don't we? And we've all seen it happen so often where it does happen and we kind of wish we'd done stuff before it was an issue. On that note, I'd like to make the point, my accent is a Kiwi one, so I grew up in New Zealand, and you know, the great thing about, it's still terrible, we have these disasters in Australia. The great thing about most of the usual natural disasters, such as floods and fire and cyclones, is that we generally get some warning. Now, even if you only get the day or two warning, you kind of want to have the stuff in place before that. You'll be in a much better position if you do. Coming from New Zealand, though, they have volcanoes and earthquakes. There's been a recent one in my home city, in fact, and there is absolutely no warning. So pretty important that they're prepared always. But, you know, isn't it a good thing that we have at least usually a day or two up our sleeve of notification to brush up things, get safety things happening, and start executing this plan? So what I want to encourage you as businesses in terms of risk is to look at the risk of uncertainty on objectives. So, you know, storm season is something that happens every single year in Queensland. Starts in October, goes through till about February or March. Some seasons are worse than others, but with it comes storms, there can be flooding, there can be bushfires. And we've seen that in recent years in a really big way. So the great thing about, I guess, being in this point in time is we've all seen it in recent memory. So we haven't forgotten the impacts, and we've totally realised the point of all of this. Sometimes when there's been a bit of a 10-year, 20-year gap between anything major, people start slacking off a bit, don't they? But you need to think about all of these things and how they could affect your products and services, facilities, supply chain, customers, employees, contractors. Because as we've all seen, it is a bit of a domino effect, isn't it, of just how it pans out. And sometimes what the effect is not always the obvious. Like, one thing that I know was a big impact on a lot of businesses was loss of data. And they just didn't even think about, you know, backing up or having stuff saved in the cloud or getting it off premises. Unbelievable how many companies I thought in the floods actually had servers in the basement, which was the first place to flood, and even very big savvy companies just had not got that data backed up in another location. So we've talked about the risk plan. The great thing for you is there's a fantastic table that you can go through and work through the workbook that you've been provided as part of registering for this webinar. So you'll notice the headings are as follows. We've got risk, so it's about identifying what's a risk, what's the likelihood of that happening, then the consequences. Now over under there on the right, you can see that there's L, which signifies that it's a low chance, M is a mild chance, H is a high chance, and E is an extreme consequence or likelihood. So you need to kind of map everything out in that order. So let's go through, let's think of an example. Who can text me a risk that they know is a risk to their business should there be a natural disaster? Anyone, maybe one of you that has experienced it, want to text me one that we could just do this little exercise? Okay, Neil said a risk is power outages on the servers. That is a risk if there's going to be storms and floods and so on. So if we put down that as a risk, what then is the likelihood, Neil? What do you think it would be? Is it a high chance? I'd say it is probably quite high. I'd probably give it a mild to H, would you? Of that happening in a storm, say? And the consequence, he said high, I'd agree with you, so I'd give that a H if I were filling in this. Now, the consequence of that, I imagine, would be pretty major if you lost, you know, the ability to do work on a computer in an office. So I'd probably give that an extreme or high. Would you as well? He said absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks for interacting with me, Neil. So what's a preventative action that we can take? Are we going to have backup servers off-site? That would be one I would suggest. Could we get the data in the cloud? Could we have a method that he suggested cloud-based? Absolutely. Could we have a method where someone backs it up and takes it off-site, perhaps to a house that's high on a hill that is very far away from where that data is stored? So there we go. There's a manual process there. I'm probably a bigger fan of cloud, but you might want to even do both. And then contingency plans, so that's where you do have a plan A, B, and C. So we could say plan A is to back it up in the cloud, and that gets done every day. Plan B is that every week someone does a backup of the whole system and takes it off-site. Plan C could be that a second person actually gets it and takes it off-site, and so on. So that is an example of how you could fill in one of these on your workbook, but you really need to brainstorm. I'd encourage you to get your whole team together over a team meeting and go, guys, what are the risks that we are subject to? Because, you know, it could be the junior, it could be the person who's just started that actually thinks of a risk that you had not even thought of. That's really valuable and worth noting. Once we've identified the risks, we basically have one of four options. We can avoid those risks by putting things in place that totally eradicate them. We can reduce the risk, we can transfer the risk, or we can accept the risk. So some things we actually can't minimize, so we just have to accept them. So I guess you need to think about that and what sort of, on that list of things, which of your risks could be avoided, reduced, transferred, or accepted. Now, I've already talked about not only having a plan A, but a plan B and C. Here's a list of some things that are straight out of the workbook you got provided that really could help you minimize a risk should disaster strike. So one, quality control processes. Even if it's not a disaster, having those processes in place, policies, procedures, etc., they're going to minimize the risk should you ever get sued, should a client be unhappy, etc. Staff training is obviously important. If not all of your staff are on the same page with what the plan is and how to act and when to do it, things can go wrong. Workplace health and safety. We've just gone through that process ourselves, and we had a map of what to do in a fire, which I thought was okay, but we had someone come in and tell us that actually that's for the whole building block, and we actually need one for this particular building as well. So they've now drafted that up, and that's posted up in a prominent place and being communicated with staff. So that's an important one to think of as well. Maintaining facilities, plant, and equipment. Where there is machinery, there is danger. So there have been lots of workplace cases, unfortunate ones, where people have been injured or even worse still killed. So you don't want that on your head. You need to maintain them and be able to prove basically that those things have been in place and that you're less therefore liable, if at all. Security devices for break-ins and things. Look, you need those on the day-to-day. You never know when that stuff could happen, but there has been cases when disaster strikes of terrible things such as looting happening. So you've got to consider what you do in that situation. Pre-storm and cyclone season preparedness. You know, you might have had a great kit together last year, which had all sorts of food in it, but maybe the staff have got hungry here and there and dipped into that. So perhaps you want to go through and just make sure the stocks are full, the water's fresh, any other items you need in there, and we'll go through some of those items up to scratch, because we're at what, July now? In July, we're about 3 months off the storm season starting again, so perhaps you could set yourself a goal to be totally ready before that time. Appropriate systems and controls we've talked about, backups we've talked about, careful selection of staff. You know, it's one thing to get a staff member who does a great job on the day-to-day. How will they handle a risk situation? If they're in a management position, will they accept that? Will they stress out? Will they freak out? So be careful with that. And also, you know, not getting the right staff. There has been cases of fraud and all sorts of damaging reputation as well. So you've got to be really careful there. And you need monitoring devices to check their work, to check what's being said. That's really hard to achieve, but through technology it's possible. So that can also minimize risk in your business. Cloud we've talked about, emergency procedures and kits, evacuation plans, doing a drill and a test. All of this will honestly protect you a fair bit. So is there any other items that we could have had in this diagram that you're sitting there thinking you haven't got that? I'd love to see what you reckon. Anything else you think is a good backup plan that just every business should be thinking about? Feel free to text me in. Nothing coming through just now. I'll continue, but feel free to write. Maybe you're writing me a bit of a novel, which I totally welcome. Do you remember the old Boy Scout thing, the We're Prepared? I was a Girl Guide, and I remember we had to learn that one too. The next in the PPRR is the preparedness. So prevention is first. We've talked through that now. Preparedness, what can you do to prepare? So being proactive and planning for the likelihood of an event that could interrupt your business. Get rid of the myth that it won't happen to me. But prepare, be proactive, rehearse and do the drills. And, you know, being prepared really means taking action prior to an incident occurring to ensure it is an effective response and recovery. Pretty important stuff. All right, moving on. Now, apart from a risk assessment, we also encourage all businesses to do what's called a BIA. Now, this is called, and if you say the full name, Business Impact Analysis. So it sounds very technical, but it's not that difficult really. Basically, this largely captures the preparedness aspect of the PPRR, which is why we've got it at this point of the presentation. It's used to establish critical business activities that if you were not able to perform, your business is not going to earn money, therefore can't stay in business. the resources required to support each activity, and the impact of ceasing to perform these activities. You know, I challenge you to think about, if I was to stop key business activities, how long could you keep your head above water? How much cash reserves do you have that would allow you to still stay in business? You know, for some businesses, the issue when some of the floods and the cyclone Yazis and the big things that have hit Queensland have occurred in the last few years, it wasn't so much that the business premises got ruined, that they could cope with. It was often the after stuff. It was the fact that they couldn't get the suppliers they needed to create or manufacture what they normally created. Some of you might remember McDonald's. They couldn't even get, I think their whole warehouse in Brisbane went under, and wherever you wanted McDonald's, they had very limited burger selection there for a while as a result of the supplier onflow. So, you know, if McDonald's can't make burgers, that's kind of a critical business activity. So that's an example there. We've got one on screen to take you through as well. Production services. Let's say that you produce customized widgets for individual custom orders. It's a high priority. If you weren't able to do it, this business is saying it would lose $7,500 per week. It would get a build-up of stock and inventory. Customers will start going other places. You wouldn't be able to meet overheads like wages and rent, because they don't stop. Just because you've had this flood, sometimes people are nice and the landlord might let you off a bit of rent, but the staff generally need that money for their mortgages and lifestyles, and then you might have to lay off people. So for this business, it was 2 weeks was all they could cope with. So I'd love to see if there's any comments coming through. Not so much on this phase, but I guess then I'll just encourage you to go ahead and do a BIA as well as a risk assessment as part of the homework post the session. Right, we've gone through P, which is prevention, the next P, which is preparedness. Now we're on to response, the first R, and that is, if disaster strikes, how will you or your team respond? Because it should be a team thing. They are going to be looking to you, if you are the leader at your business, to lead. But I guess you've got to ask, are you the right person? Because maybe you're not great in crises. Maybe you're not a good communicator. Maybe you're already anticipating that you're going to have way too much on your plate, sorting out behind the scenes insurances and, you know, new supply chains and whatever. You actually might need someone else that you nominate as the spokesperson and or team leader coordinator in this situation. Because pretty much a response team should include, no matter how big you are, a team leader, which may or may not be you, as I'm saying. A response team, is everyone on board, or is a certain section of the business on board, is a senior team or whatever. Assessors, you know, who have you got, rather than trying to look for them when everyone is going to want them, that you can establish a relationship and build a relationship with, so that if disaster strikes, they're there, you know their contact details. Who's your spokesperson? Again, you may or may not be good with this kind of thing. Media might want to talk to you, customers might want to talk to you. These can be very delicate situations and you want to handle them with care. It's basically crisis management. So you're really looking, if you're looking for a professional, with someone with crisis management skills and PR skills. So look, again, rather than look for them when you really need them, look for them before you even need them, and have their number on speed dial, and have their number not just in your phone, which may have died and your charger may have been at work and got flooded or burnt or something. Have them in various locations, possibly in the cloud, where you can just access the internet anywhere and obtain that information. You also need a commitment from them that the crisis, should you need them, will be their top and only priority. So that's pretty key. One thing to get the PR team on board, but when you actually really need them, for them to turn around and go, we're too busy, we're handling everyone else's stuff. So you want to consider that as well. So raise your hand if you actually do already have a response team in place, and tell me who are some of the roles. AD said our CEO is the spokesperson only, and that makes sense in a lot of cases, but as I was saying, depends on the personality and how they handle these situations. Hands up if you've got a response team. Looks like not many people. Look, if you're small and you're thinking, we couldn't do a response team, it's me and my husband that run the business, or maybe it's only you, you need to think of who else you could get. You know, could a friend or family member become the team leader? Or will you, and could they be part of your response team? So maybe ask your neighbours, should something happen, would you be able to kick in for me? This is the sort of thing I need. I need your numbers, I need your emails, I need your commitment that you will help me should something happen. The assessors you can look at, spokespeople as well, you can look at without actually contracting them. All right, now I want to know, raise your hands. I'm really hoping the answer is yes to this one. If you have a disaster emergency kit, who's got one of those ready to go at home and at their workplace? AD does. Anybody else? Neil does. Daisy does. Is that all? Or have you guys not found the hands up? Wow. There's homework. I saw another hand up. Tracy, good on you. All right, you basically all need an emergency kit. Here's an example of one, and it's got stuff in it that you may not have thought of. You've probably thought of water. You may have thought of food, blankets, etc., because you might be sleeping at your office, you know. This rang true for me. We had flash flooding here about a year ago, and I actually went to leave, and I could not go home. There was no way I could. So I managed to get to my mum's house, but I was seriously lucky to get there, and I nearly stayed at the office, and there was one old woolen blanket, and I thought, that's fine for me, but what if the rest of the team were here? And I looked at the cupboards, and the cupboards were bare, so now I always keep a few extra soups and porridge and bits and pieces that I could cook up should I need to. Look, checklists in that bag is a really good idea, printed, ready to go. So let's say you're on holiday in Fiji, which was the case actually for some people who, when the Queensland floods hit, they were on their summer holiday. So they needed that second team leader to kick in, and they needed just a checklist to run through. So think about that. A list of the personnel who have the authority to invoke the plan and under what circumstances, so spell all that out. An event log. That one is really important actually. When it comes to insurances, paying, they'll want to know exactly what you did, when you did it, and how you did it. So if you can actually record a log of inform this team, action this, did that, it's going to make you look really clever, and it will increase your chance of being looked after with this disaster and the insurance side of things. You need an evacuation plan. You might want to have stuff on Google Docs or other cloud systems, as we've talked about. Strategic communications, who's your PR person? Is there a press release? What press will you tell? A Go pack with all critical documents. So you might want to have a printed version of key client, supplier, contractor, staff contacts on there as well, because, you know, phones can die, phones can get wet, phones can not have a charge source, which was a big issue through the Queensland floods as well. A list of response team members, and then clear direct instructions for the crucial first hour after a crisis hits. So who's now thinking they might get one of those? Hands up if you're definitely, from this webinar, look at getting one of these. Could be a good idea, hey? Cool. Lisa, Jody, lots of people putting their hands up. Thanks for interacting again. Okay, getting through this, mobilising a response. So we're encouraging you to identify an appropriate team to surround yourselves in this regard. You know, just know that with disaster can be reputation to your damage to your reputation if you don't handle the stuff well. It's not just physical disasters that can impact. So on screen here, the really amazing thing about Twitter is that when the Queensland flood struck, you can see here I've taken a screenshot of it when it was at the height of it. Twitter can be a really good way to mobilise a response and communicate with customers. So maybe previously you've gone, Twitter, what a load of rubbish, do I really need that? But a lot of businesses from the recent disasters clicked onto the fact it's a really quick, easy way to get the word out. And not only that, people retweet it and can pass it on for you. So you can see on this Twitter stream, using the hashtag QLD floods, people were communicating what it looked like, what's underwater, what was happening with the media, the emergency response, and so on. So it's really amazing. QPR, Queensland Police, they got all sorts of awards for their response on Twitter to these disasters. And interestingly enough, it was a couple of young people at the office that didn't even have the authority but could see the potential to help people, so just did it without approvals, and it turned into a really good thing for them. So that's a real landmark social media story. But, you know, with your response, you really need to define the problem and determine the strategy accordingly. Maybe the problem's that you can't open your doors and won't be for the foreseeable future and you don't have a time on it. Maybe it's that you can't get the supplies that you normally get. Maybe it's that your whole warehouse is burnt down with all your paper. You know, I was dealing with a book publishing company, and that's what happened to them in Perth. All their all their paper burnt down, and I was in the middle of a print run, so they had to communicate with me and let me know my book was going to be seriously delayed. The first hour is vital, so getting the word out. Better to say something than nothing, even if it is a bit vague, and you'll let them know you'll have more information for them when you can. Understand the changing situation and manage information effectively. This is where Twitter's great, because you might not know what's really going on out there, but if you have the radio going, you have Twitter going, you can then share that information. You know, our shop is cut off, but it looks like it'll be being made accessible again in the next week. So thanks for your patience type thing. Sometimes it's best to assume the worst case scenario and that things will get worse before they get better in terms of what you discuss. Sometimes you need to call on experts and allies if needed. So, you know, you could literally tweet at QPR or at Courier Mail, for instance, and say, this is the situation with us. I'd love you to retweet that out to help get the message out there about what's happening with your business. So hopefully a few good ideas there. Does anyone here use Twitter and have thought of using it for an emergency situation? Any Twitter users here? All right, we've got Jody, Dapo, AD. Yeah, it works really amazing, doesn't it, with Twitter? So I encourage you to do that. Having said that, to use Twitter, you obviously need an internet connection. Good idea to have a spare battery. I know people in the Christchurch earthquake, they said that was one of the things they all wish they had, was a spare battery for their phone. They were using it sparingly, but, you know, when things happen towards the end of the day and the phone's pretty low anyway, doesn't give you much scope for getting help and communicating. This diagram, I thought, was a good way to communicate just how powerful Twitter was through those Queensland floods. Twitter users sent more than 35,000 tweets with the QLD floods hashtag between a 6-day time frame, and official police accounts, media were the most influential voices. This little cloud shows you basically who was spreading the message, and you can see down there ABC News, QPS Media, 612 Brisbane, were very, very prolific with all of it and very helpful for a lot of people for sharing information. Right, the final R and the PPRR principle, recovery. How, excuse me, will you bounce back? So recovering can be broadly divided into resumption, continuity of business activities, and restoration of resources. So gosh, there were some amazing cases, weren't there, of how people worked around it and got back into it. And some of them never recovered, and some of them are still recovering, and maybe some of you are even those people. You know, we've seen makeshift businesses erected, people selling stuff for cheap, people letting their neighbours move in and use their premises, all sorts of great things, and that is how you bounce back. But you've got to have an enormous amount of, I guess, tenacity and strength to do that, and you may well need the support of people around you to do so. Part of the recovery as well is just being really honest with yourself and assessing the extent of the damage caused, including injuries. All of those you actually need to document in that event log that I was telling you about, because again, you may find that you need to share that information with police, with insurance, with all sorts of people. Just continually communicate right through. Don't do one update saying we're closed until further notice and don't send anything else. It can be really damaging for your business. Continue to say, you know, we've become accessible, we think the next week, and the next week it's still a few more days away, and just keep the messaging going. Make sure that staff understand, because amongst all this, it's really easy to be worried about clients and suppliers and so on, but you know, people are the lifeblood of your business, and don't presume that they just know because they're around you. Give it to them straight. Make sure you give it to them. They don't hear stuff in the media or through neighbours or, you know, word of mouth about what's going on with the business and whether they still have a job. Most times, in examples of disasters we've seen, staff are really open to just making sure that the business stays in business if they like working with you. And there's been examples of them working for nothing or working part-time or bringing in their friends and family to get things back up and running, which is awesome if you've got staff like that. So don't forget that human aspect. Don't forget that can be very traumatic for the staff and not just you. They might need a cuddle, they might need a smile, they might need a joke cracked and so on. So in short, update your BCP and you'll be in a much better position. Sometimes you have to change the way you're thinking and look for the opportunity in a crisis. You know, consider when things are lost, changed dramatically, perhaps forever, has the market actually changed? Should we actually consider selling what we were selling, or in the way that we were selling it, or to the customers we were selling to? This is kind of your chance to reinvent yourself if you want to. Do you need to support existing customers? How's your reputation? Some people actually really develop their reputation through disasters by showing that they were human, that they were responding, they were looking after their staff. People really warm to them. I mean, just think of some of the major banks and how certain ones, you know, covered insurance over others, and how many people warmed to those particular banks through this. And that was something, an opportunity that they saw and they took and they did very well through. Is there an opportunity for community service? Can you get people in the community helping? Could you give back to the community as well? And are there strategic communications? So some people did use these disasters as an opportunity to show how innovative, creative, resilient, and so on they were. And if that's something that would benefit your business, then certainly look at that. So here's a little story, a vignette about how a business did that. A newly established industrial and commercial hard services cleaning company had severe regional flooding. So the effect for them was that they were unaffected actually by the flooding. The demand for their services, the cash flow, and their prospects just dropped away. So just goes to show, even if you're not directly affected, you can be indirectly affected by these things. So the response, they volunteered staff and equipment for community support, which enhanced their reputation and got them local media coverage. And then they used this experience to develop a flood cleanup offer that got them new clients, including the Queensland government, and they were suddenly stronger and more resilient. So that was quick thinking, clever thinking, innovative thinking by them. Because imagine if they had just had the whole lot dry up and went, woe is us, you know, because of that damn flood, we've now not got a business, and just sort of rolled over and died. So instead, that was a really good way to approach it on a positive note. Okay, it's one thing to have a plan, but I also want to mention that you really should test the plan, because let's say you guys go and do a risk assessment today. Your risk will actually change over time. Your risk will change if you change offices, if you change the nature of your business, what you're selling, if you have staff changes and so on. So you really should be looking at it regularly. And how often? Well, anytime there's a major change, really. Same goes for your insurances, actually. So if you've got, you know, a new business partner, new staff, all of that stuff that I just mentioned, go revisit it, get the team on board. Maybe some of the new staff have picked up on risks. I love getting my staff involved because they're involved every day at the cold front of the whole business, and they know what the risks are if you encourage them to spot them and know what they are. Training your people in the BCP, even though you gave them the plan and had a plan way back when, doesn't mean they'll remember it. So pretty good to refresh it every so often. And conduct rehearsals and exercises. So my staff are probably going to think I'm silly, but we've got this new site map, as I said, and we are going to at some point just do a little march outside and onto the lawn where we would gather if there were a disaster, just so nobody can say, I didn't know that was where you meant, I thought it was the other grass patch, or any confusion like that. I know that that will basically strengthen my business and protect us as well. So look, that's what I've got for you today. In summary, know your risks, have a plan, practice the plan, and know that there's also a lot of resources available to you. Let me tell you what some of those are. If you go to business.qld.gov.au, that is the Queensland Government's main website for business, and it has huge amounts of resources. Go ahead and search business continuity planning on there, and you'll pull up all sorts of great resources, templates, and so on. On Facebook.com, they also are there. Go ahead and like them, see their regular updates. They're very good. They do talk business continuity planning sometimes, and I'm pretty sure coming up to the storm season, they'll be talking about it a whole lot more. Same goes on Twitter. There's regular videos on YouTube. And finally, they also have a business and industry portal with lots of information, and on there is a business continuity planning link as well that you may like to check out. Anthony, I might get you to send that link out to everyone so they can just go ahead and click on it and bookmark it as well. So I did want to let you know that there is a whole lot more in the workbook apart from what we've said today. It's just reinforcing those points, but please do go ahead and look at that. But before we log off, opportunity for questions, comments. Anthony, was there any thing that had come through, or just mainly comments is what I've been picking up on. Just checking what you guys have got to say. Okay. John has said, retesting the plan gives your staff a good message about the boss's commitment if the fire escape plan is practiced, even though some people will whinge about the phones not being answered or that they're too busy to leave the office. That's right, John. They may well whinge and come outside kicking and screaming, but hey, a bit of fresh air is probably good for them, and that does exactly show your commitment as a boss and that you're serious and you take these things seriously. I'll send out the survey link in just a moment. Anyone else have any further comments? Did we enjoy today's session? Did we get some ideas on what we might need to do to plan for emergencies? Hands up if you did get a few tips and there's things you plan to do as a result. Yes, lots of you are saying, thanks, it was great. Yes, yes, thanks, thank you. We'll get all the staff to use a fire extinguisher. That's a good idea, you know, AD. I wouldn't have a clue how to use one, and I really should learn.